Hey, welcome everybody to the Strive Summit podcast. Today with me, I have Mike, and we are getting relaxed today. Mike, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Michael Freiert. I'm the BIM manager for Pope Design Group in St. Paul, Minnesota. But what, Alex? What else do you want to know? Where do you want me to run with a short bio here?
Where are you at? You're in Minnesota. You got kids?
Yep, got kids. I've got a daughter in first grade. Live out in the suburbs. Have a wide variety of crazy interests outside of work. I mean, you can't see the electronics prototyping station quite behind me, but there's 3D printing stuff, keyboards. I don't currently have any fish in the aquarium behind me. There's orchids over there. I garden.
I do see a UFO poster behind you.
Yeah, that's old X-Files. That's a poster from college that as I was clearing stuff out to set up my office during the pandemic, I found sifting through all the crap that hadn't been unpacked yet. I'm like, oh, I know just where this needs to go, and I'm in a basement office. Let's see if anybody gets the joke.
If anyone knows me, Sasquatch is out there, and I know I have a couple of friends out there who don't believe it and stuff, and I'm a pretty firm believer. I actually went to the thrift store the other day, and I found a hat called Squatch Conference, and I was
Oh,
like,
nice.
I had no idea that was a thing. So now I'm getting my tickets.
There's a whole host of conferences, sub-conferences. Apparently there are schisms within the Sasquatch community. I've not wandered down that that rabbit hole, but I found out way more than I wanted to at a Sasquatch Bigfoot themed gas station that stopped at driving up north one summer.
So to give you kind of perspective, I moved from North Chicago area,
Right.
Southern Wisconsin area, to Idaho. And for anyone who hasn't been out into the middle of nowhere, it's out west. Anywhere like an hour and a half in is the middle of nowhere.
It's like the opposite of going so I've been out west a little bit, driven out for skiing a couple times, and like the difference between like Chicago versus like rural Minnesota versus like out west is like going from urban Europe to like generally rural most of the eastern half of the US. Like you're 15 minutes from something.
Yeah.
Like rural Minnesota, you can be a solid half an hour from anything. But out west, you can be like half a day from anything.
I always joke Boise is the closest place to nothing. Where the nearest city is Salt Lake, and it's 5 hours. Like the nearest biggest city. Like we have our Idaho cities, Twin Falls, stuff like that. But it's Salt Lake 8. I think Bozeman or Salt Lake's 5, Bozeman's 6 or 7. Portland, Seattle, like 8 or 9.
Yeah, but like how big is Boise?
Boise is about as big as the county I moved out of. That being said, right. I was in Lake County, so not Cook County, Chicago, but the one right above it. So pretty heavily populated. I want to say right now we have 700,000 in like the valley, including Boise and Caldwell, all these other cities.
Greater metropolitan area.
Yeah. But like I tell you could drive an hour north and you're in the woods.
Right.
An hour south, you're in the desert. East or west, you're in the desert. So, love it out here. Best thing I ever did for my life.
Nice.
But it's out here. So Sasquatch is real. Moral of the story is Sasquatch is real. Yeah. UFOs are out there. Welcome to Joe Rogan Podcast. No.
Boy.
Mike, I want to know, how you got to where you're at today. So first off, this might be rude to say, but how old are you?
45, 46. It changes every year. It's hard to keep track.
46. Where did you start? Was it in high school you got inspired? Was it middle school?
I don't know. I don't remember not... Looking back, and I've sort of noodled on like how I got here. Like, there's a number of spots where I can be like, oh, this was a turn. But like looking back, I can't think of a point at which where I've ended up doesn't make sense for where I thought I wanted to go. It's definitely not where I expected to go, not where I thought I was going to go. But so BIM management in general is for those who are not AEC geeks, architectural or engineering construction, is taking the idea of all of the information we have about a building and making it accessible to all the parties who need it. So from a design standpoint, that means making the digital representation of the walls easy for the architects to manipulate, and then easy to visualize for the construction folks, and then eventually easy for the owners to work with as the building grows, or they need to repair it, or things like that, or they're curious about what paint is on a wall. And so it's a lot of information management theory, but it's very heavily couched around particular tools that my particular team, my architects, need to do stuff. I landed there because I wanted to go into architecture, but sort of because I was a bad designer. So I've always loved creating stuff. I've always loved making stuff. I mean, I've got, Dungeons and Dragons minis here that like, this guy's half painted. You can see that, painting stuff behind me because I like to make things. The 3 of the keyboards back there I built nearly from scratch. Like I didn't mold my own keys and whatnot, but like,
right.
I've done a whole lot of work on them. I've done a ton of customization on them. I've got a 3D printer, 2 3D printers down here, next to me. I'm an avid woodworker. I like to make things happen, or to make things real. But from acting so I acted a bit as a kid, community theater. Acted a bit in high school. Had a couple of, for a high school play, reasonably well reviewed roles. I mean, that's
any commercials we need to know about and look up real quick.
Nothing. There might be a VHS copy of like me as a little kid in Christmas Carol or something like that, but nothing. Nothing exciting. No, like no real theater. But mid-tier role in High School Musicals, that sort of stuff. But I realized I wasn't really good. I was not great at acting. So I started working backstage because I still loved theater. I loved that, creating something beautiful and something interesting for folks. And I realized that from working in theater and then working in theater in college, I was less good at the new original design, coming up with the crazy ideas, than I was with making those happen. So if a director wanted to produce, I don't even remember what the show was, but we needed like 17 bathtubs and like 30 doors.
Okay.
It's actually the show that got me into lockpicking, which is a whole different tangent. But coming up with that idea for that set would just not have occurred to me. But once they had that concept, I could take that and run with it and help them refine it and help them polish it. And so I leaned heavily into theater tech and facilitating and being a technical director. Well, what I realized somewhere in high school, early college, probably high school, because I wanted to go into architecture, because I worked in a few theaters in competitive high school theater that were just hot garbage. Like, they were not useful for either the performers or for the audience. They were not, we're not talking like cafe gymnatoriums.
Right.
We're talking actual theaters that like had bad sight lines. Like, there was not a comfortable seat in the house. You couldn't see the stage. The stage was too shallow. The stage was too, it just didn't work. It wasn't good acoustically. There's nothing about it made it useful as a theater. And I was like, I've always liked buildings. I can fix this. but I didn't want to mainstream nicotine and caffeine for 5 years and come out only able to do one thing. I wanted a traditional liberal arts degree. I wanted to study everything. I wanted to be able to problem solve. So plan was to get a bachelor in theater, focusing on scenic design and technical direction, and then get an MArch and go into architecture to design theaters. I did not agree with the methodologies of the theater department at Cornell University, so I went into medieval history because it's obviously the same thing.
Clearly.
And studied comparative warfare theory, and between medieval Europe and medieval Japan and Asia, and realized that I like all sorts of stuff. I like knowledge in general, but I also like trying to figure out how stuff works.
Yeah.
Was getting frustrated with Cornell, really missing actual proper winters. Upstate New York, outside of the snow belt, does not get snow. They just get gray. And while Minnesota is cold, we have sunshine. Like, it is, like, we had a week of what would be like the entire winter in Ithaca, and like the whole state's like, this is not okay. What is this? Where is, the sun? Like, I'm used to wearing sunglasses in winter because it's that bright out. Moved back to Minnesota. Wasn't finding purchase in the local theater community because the Twin Cities has a really, really killer theater community.
Okay.
Like, amazing, like world class. We sell, last I looked it up, we sell more tickets per capita than New York City does for theater.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But a lot of it is much more community based or volunteer based. So I came in having left upstate New York as a professional sound engineer. Like, I worked with a bunch of really great bands. Like, I was used to getting a livable daily wage to do my work, and like finding a gig here, I was like, hey, can I work for sound for your bar? Like, oh yeah, you get all the beer you can drink. I'm like, will not pay my rent, and you have no idea how much beer I can drink. But I could probably drink my wages in beer, but I will not be healthy out of this. But like, this is even at early
not
20s,
sustainable.
that was not going to pay the rent.
Right.
And I had a lot of friends who were working in theater, but they were working in theater as their second jobs, or like they were getting paid $100 for a show that was 8 weeks worth of their time. I know a number of folks who are union carpenters at the Guthrie and stuff like that who do make a living at it, but those jobs are relatively fewer, and I didn't have the local connections to get those, and like I didn't want to fight through all that again. So I got a CAD degree and got a drafting gig. Originally, my first job out of drafting school was working for a quilt making company to do pattern engineering for them.
Okay.
And that because why not? 20 years on, I hardly wear trousers. I'm always in a kilt. And but that was like worked for them several months directly, and then off and on for a couple years. And then for a theater design or single family home builder, theater consultancy, actually, the first downturn, got laid off, went into BIM consulting more heavily, and have been in BIM since. So like I briefly had that, working on making theaters better. But the more I dug into design technology there, the more excited I got about it. There was a Post-it note on the column next to my desk that a coworker had stuck up there that said, "Because you like to learn new things." And it was a very insightful thing on their part. For me, is like, this is something new that I can learn. This is something that I can take. I'm curious. So that the random crazy gas station lady telling me about Bigfoot's philosophical schisms, like, this is interesting. My wife is like, "You're talking to her? We need to leave." I'm like, it's better than me buying another pound of beef jerky that we don't need. Like, might as well chat with the locals. So I ended up finding in architecture the same role as a very similar role as what I found in theater of supporting the creative stuff. So, when a designer would come to me with like, "Hey, how do we do this in Revit? How do we do this in Rhino? How do we do this? I I want to do this. How do I make it happen?" I'm like, "Well, we can unplug this and move this over here and call the structural engineer and ask them if they can, support this from that." And so a lot of designers from architecture school, a lot of folks are less focused on how to make it happen and more the coming up with the idea. And I love all the crazy cool stuff that my designers can come up with that I never would. But what I've run into is a lot of them saying like, "I don't know if I can do this," and them self-limiting because they're not willing to do something magical.
Right. Creativity's lost.
Well, it's they want to self-limit because they want to be practical. They want what they're doing to be viable. And sometimes all that means is instead of, maybe you hang one or two steel cables and conceal them instead of having, a 2x4 drop down or a steel stud drop down to support something. Maybe maybe you can do something a little unconventional. Pull something in from an old stage illusion trick. Take a hint from stage magic on how you can actually make this part of your thing like work. Like, Disney's story facades are mostly 2 stories tall, but they look 3 stories because they've used slight illusions to make those seem bigger. So finding ways to do that. So you can't build it this tall. Well, we don't have to build it that tall. Let's do something else crazy.
That's super interesting. That's
leveraging tools to make those things happen.
Yeah, it's really cool how you came from acting, which is, you would never think BIM and acting or architecture and acting, but you went to the portion of you saw an issue with sound stages, and then you're like, I could definitely build this better, and then your creativity took over, and you want to do more and learn more, and then you got that opportunity to solve problems, and then next thing you know, you're doing scripting and doing Rhino, and
exactly. And like in 9th grade, we had back when shop class still existed. Had a shop class, and I was the only person in my section who aced the fractions test. Which, go figure, but whatever.
I would not ace it, but yeah, go ahead.
And so the instructor's like, "Here, go in my office for the next week while the rest of the class learns how to add inches and play with Legos." And there was an Apple IIe, 2 something, and what eventually became Lego Mindstorms. I don't think it was called Mindstorms yet, but I built a 4-axis little robotic arm out of Legos during shop class. It was like, give me something to futz with. I'm gonna do figure out something crazy to do with it. And like it wasn't an assignment. It was like, here, don't bother me while I try and teach these kids how to add 2 foot 3 inches and 4 inches 11/16.
That's incredible. Like, so
and that was in basic, right? So like, I've gone from like basic through like, I'm trying to learn Python, and it just makes no sense to me.
Well, like shop class for me, I was the last year that shop class was available before we graduated. It was no longer there. So I would say I am that cutoff year. I'm that millennial change from the millennial that works to the millennial that everyone calls lazy. I'm right there.
I think it's a lack of. So one of my big complaints about architecture is that so many architects, younger architects, haven't learned how to hand draft. And they don't need to learn to hand draft because they need to draw that much. But what they needed to learn was how to actually think in converting between 2D and 3D. And when you're forced to slow down and look at something in 3D and draft it out by hand and think about exactly how you're representing it, that really changes how you intellectualize 3D space versus 2D space. But then we stopped teaching people how to draft. So we have architects now who've never done a detail. So when you're looking at a detailing a CD set, the details aren't as clear because they've just copied in from the last project. Because with computers, Control C, Control V, it's fast, it's easy.
It's on my mouse, yeah.
But we've stopped teaching folks to create those because they just have to copy them. So that they're not. We have this. I think a big problem with the generational shift is not just we're losing those details. It's we're forgetting to teach people how to do some other stuff. Like we have these cool new awesome tools. Don't get me wrong. But if you don't know what they're based on,
all right, I think
you start to lose something.
Right, I think a lot of the software we have today, a lot of designers and modelers and architects take for granted, right? And I don't mean it in a bad way. It's taken for granted of this is the software, use the software and work. Now, I was fortunate enough we had a CAD class in high school, and that last year was available to me, and I took it. And basically, it was just AutoCAD and isometric drawings for a whole semester, and it was no mouse; it was all keyboard. And I remember, like that class for me was easy because 3D space and isometric and 2D was easy for me to understand.
Right.
And I saw other people struggle, and I was like, oh, maybe this is for me, that kind of stuff. But the isometric drawings that I drew, the simple, like, you're basically making Tetris blocks in isometric views. That taught me concept of depth better than when I learned manual drafting when I went to college. So I learned a little. I had a class of manual drafting, right? We also did a class that was rapid visualization, which I thought was an awesome class. And the concept behind it was you're sitting with a client, the client tells you what you want, and you take their image, you put it on a sheet of paper, and you show them in 30 minutes or less. One of the courses that I remember the most, and it's kind of like an art thing, but basically we would go outside, we'd look at a building and say, okay, draw that building in 3D. And so you start with your building and your perspectives and everything like that. Now in Revit, my background is also mechanical drafting, so fractions was not my thing. I tried to avoid construction at all costs. I thought I was going to be Tony Stark. Never happened. So when it comes to modeling in Revit, 3D concepts were very easy for me to understand. I can understand depth. I understand that, like, hey, when this part moves in the model, you got to check the part way below.
So you weren't one of those mechanical drafters who puts all the ducks at 4 feet?
Oh no! There's a if you guys don't know, there's a little button up there or a little ribbon you could kind of fill in what you want. That is also, I don't want to talk about too much issues and stuff here, but I do want to talk about the concepts of training and learning. And my job now is to train and educate, people in Revit. I love that. For those who are using Revit, there are modify commands with every other command. So if you hit duck, your ribbon turns green, and there's modifiers below it. And the reason I say that is a lot of people who architects, for instance, don't learn Revit in college.
Or if they do, they only learn it for certain parts.
Yeah, engineers, MEP guys, they don't learn Revit.
Going back to the folks we need to teach people more. But we also need to think about what we're actually teaching. So like when 20 years ago, a new intern architect was hand drafting or working in CAD to draw up a new detail, they weren't just learning how the line styles worked and the layers worked in AutoCAD. They were learning how that assembly works in a building. And that was important. When you used the keyboard commands for the command line shortcuts in AutoCAD, or the drop-down menu, when you click the menu and it dropped down the entire freaking 30 different commands, and you have to fish through to find the right one. What you were learning was not, okay, I want this particular one that's halfway down. you were being exposed to 29 other ideas, 29 other commands. The problem with the ribbon, which I think is probably like the worst thing to happen to UI and UX and software training in the last, possibly ever, is that contextual commands never show you anything else. You only see the 5 commands you need, that it thinks you need. So there are, I forget how many 100 or 1,000 commands that still, or at least last I looked and last I asked about it, still exist in the Revit code that you could get to with a like hotkey shortcut, but you can't get to anymore because there's no button for them.
I'm trying to think of a command because
a lot of them are ones you don't use, so they're not the ones you use commonly. But you think about the folks who are AutoCAD gurus.
Oh.
Like I've been beta testing AutoCAD for 20 years. Like I have forgotten more than many people will ever know about it. But I'm hot garbage with it now. Like I literally have forgotten most of that. But there are commands that I will go to like other CAD managers. I'm like, hey, I need to do this thing. It's not overkill. It's something similar. What's it called? And they're like, what are you talking about? And they will have, if they didn't start back in the command line AutoCAD days, they will have no clue. So like I need somebody who is like at least 45, if not 55, to answer that question. Or like is the like hyper focused support guy who knows all of those things. Like it's not that knowledge is just gone. Those tools exist. But it's like when we look at, I don't have any. Usually on my desk, I've got a few old arcane tools. Oh, I know what I can grab. Hold on.
Arcane tools. Yeah, the thing about AutoCAD, I'm gonna keep talking. The thing about AutoCAD is like, I remember when I was doing AutoCAD, I was a keyboard shortcut. Like I'd touch my mouse maybe to move it over once in a while. But since I learned how to draw lines and stuff using coordinate systems on CAD, which is easy because it's 2D and it's XY, right?
Right.
And you have your set increments and you can do what you need to do. I'd be working on the keyboard, setting my commands, doing copies and stuff like that. With Revit, well, I'll say I moved from AutoCAD to SolidWorks. And I still think SolidWorks 2013 still has the best hotkey dynamic ever. And I wish it would come back and just be amazing because it was a mouse, kind of like if you held your right click down or your center scroll, you can set as many keys as you want around your mouse. I think it was up to.
It would spawn up a wheel.
Yeah, and you had so many options. I think you can increase it too. And all you had to do was run your mouse through that option, like move it in that direction and release the button, and you'd be in that command.
Oh, nice.
Oh, amazing!
I remember seeing it and playing with it. I remember clicking on it, but maybe mousing into it was.
Any developers out there that want to come up with that for Revit, I'll pay for it. But it's like, yeah, what do you got?
This is a lining dotting tool. So you drag this along the paper.
Okay.
And the little wheel here, I'm missing the setup item for it. Oh no, it runs along your ruler. And as this goes along, it raises and lowers your dotting pen. So this is a dip pen. You dip in your ink and you roll it along your paper, and it goes doot 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 doot, and makes dots.
Did you have dash line ones and?
Oh yeah, so there's different wheels for different line patterns.
If you guys out there listening right now, I have a little bit of a collection of old school drafting tools because I find them very awesome and unique. Mine are just calipers at the moment, but I have a lot. That was a Pocket Buddy one. What was that one? It was like this big.
Yeah. No, I just grabbed one particular set over here that I knew had that in it. And I don't have a big or interesting collection of drafting tools.
Yeah.
But those, understanding where we came from, like history major, good, bad, all sorts of fun divergence and learn stuff that doesn't apply to you and figure out how it applies to you. Because you'll learn cool things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Being excited about random stupid stuff is how I ended up speaking in Dublin about a chicken coop, right? So like you don't, just because something doesn't seem immediately useful to you, figure out what it does and tell your friends about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what a tool does and how it works lets us understand more about it. So like if you don't learn why you're doing something, if you're just taught to do something, but also if you don't think about what someone's learning from what they're doing. So from a student standpoint, you really want to learn as much as you can, right?
Right.
But from a teaching standpoint, you want your examples to be as compelling as possible. Because you don't want to, we hear that, teach it 3 different ways. Show them, say it one way, say it another way, all these
Yeah.
different, repeat, because the slow kid's not going to catch it anyways. And try not to make it so boring that the kid who actually got it the first time around is frustrated with you.
Right.
But what else are you teaching them? Like what else can you present in that lets them continue to grow and hopefully continues to spark that excitement? Because if you just tell someone how to do one little thing,
Right.
that's boring. That gives them a task.
So one thing I'd like to do is make a video of The Sims, making a wall, doing a house in Sims, and then doing the exact house in Revit, and kind of showcase Tell me that's hard. Hold on, he's thinking.
No, I'm trying to think who. I swear somebody built a script for that.
Oh, I want to show the comparison just for viewers' sake. But yeah, that'd be awesome if there's a script for it. You mean I could take my Revit model and put it in Sims, or vice versa?
I think it was Sims to Revit, but it wasn't direct. Because they had to take it was a.
Well, you're gonna have to tell me what that is when you figure it out.
It was like a export the Sims geometry and then run that through something else that was able to create it from Revit. I think was, and I want to say it was one of those stupid Dynamo tricks that has no,
like build wall from face or something like that.
Yeah, but like it was like the logical, like, well, we can that's it, like, we did it once, let's do it 5,000 times and see what goes wrong.
Yeah.
Or let's dump 60 hours into this task that would take us, realistically takes a normal human 13 to accomplish.
No, that's interesting. I recently I
think it was Sims.
Well, I talked to Valentin Novas. He was telling me there's a guy who took Minecraft. No, he was building cities in Minecraft or whatever.
Okay.
Or there's a Revit to Minecraft kind of back and forth. And I mean, that's pretty believable. The community in Minecraft is pretty creative.
Yeah, I've heard about that one. There's a couple of it's not. Oh, was hanging out with him at Autodesk University this year into the wee hours, and I'm blanking on what it was. They ported what the source game was that they ported their office into.
Okay.
But they built an engine to convert, or either they rebuilt or they built an engine to convert from, to pull their office into. I want to say it was Counter-Strike, but that seems wrong.
Oh man, we're not getting into that today because I could talk.
It doesn't matter if it's not Doom. If you can't do it on Doom, because Doom will play on anything. It's gotta be. Revit to Doom. That's what we need. That's what we need. Is we need a Revit to Doom port, so you can take your project and play it as a. Because then you can play it on your phone, right?
I think so. I'm already trying to think of what I can remake to play Doom in. I got a couple of projects I'd like to play Doom in. Right. No, that's awesome. So you are a gamer.
I used to be. I got better. I played EverQuest back in the day, reasonably competitively. Back in the Command and Conquer days, early StarCraft days. Command and Conquer. Two of my good buddies in college and I guess four of us, were pretty consistently in the leaderboards.
Command and Conquer was my jam. There was one game that I forget what it's called. I played it one time at my buddy's house where you can mutate animals together to create your army. And it was like yeah. It was like a shark head and a gorilla body.
And then you got like the various
Oh man, if I find that game, and I'm off the internet for like 5 days.
That's one of those like find the right subreddit to ask that on, and if you don't get some sort of terrible Rule 34 violation, someone will give you exactly what the name of that game was.
Yeah, and don't find the wrong Reddit thread either.
Yeah, no, if you find the wrong subreddit, it's gonna go south very quickly. Yeah, no, so I like gaming from a actual like gaming standpoint. So sort of related. Like I used to play Magic the Gathering. I've gotten rid of most of my cards.
Okay.
But stage Magic, like actual like take your thumb off, that sort of stuff. And card sleight of hand. I got reasonably serious in it, but again, I discovered I was not a great performer. So I got more studying the theory of it. The figuring out how a game works, not necessarily from a metagaming, but like what are we trying to do? So Dungeons and Dragons has always kind of sung to me. A lot of the newer stuff, the folks who came in 5th edition, I've met a lot who don't quite view it in the same way, but also very much view it in the same way a lot of the older generation of D&D gamers do. Like they want it to be a creative thing, a collaborative thing. But somewhere along the lines, we sort of lost the thread there, and there's not dissimilar to the loss of knowledge that architecture had during the first big downturn, where we lost, what was it, something like 30% of the professionals, and something like 60% of mid-career professionals.
Still looking for them,
Yeah, we're trying to hire some right now, and we can't find them. Right. Well, you've got a gig. You're great.
No. Use the platform.
Oh yeah. But oh yeah. Well, yes, that platform. Yes, that platform. Yes. There's just this sort of disconnect of generation, and it's kind of been a theme. It's a fun theme. But it's been a transition from some folks want to play against the game, and some folks want to play the game. And I think that's kind of why I stopped playing EverQuest, is because it stopped being about folks having fun in the game and much more about you don't have the best gear.
Yeah. And so
and there's still folks who play that way. Like there's still folks who want to play whatever their game is for fun. But getting serious about gaming, dumping a boatload of hours into stuff, wasn't as compelling anymore.
Yeah, I think. Well, first off, if you're still into D&D, and there's been people out there listening, you want to start a D&D group, I'm down. Let's go do it.
Oh yeah, sweet. We got
shout out to the crew.
Oh yeah.
I would say gaming is something that helped me transform into this BIM career, and I consider my BIM career starting when I got into like making airplane parts and stuff with SolidWorks, right? BIM is building information modeling. I think it's any project or model information modeling. I mean.
Oh yeah. I mean that's anything that goes into a building comes out of it, right?
Or even. I did pinball machine parts before. I've made targets, and on lunch breaks I played for an hour on all these games for free, and that was great. It was an awesome experience. I did SolidWorks. I did 3D printing. I had a MakerBot 2 FDM printer. I got I got a
Did you ever have a cupcake?
yes,
Maker-bot cupcake? Did you actually
yes,
ever get a print out of it?
no.
All right, see.
I was early to the print game, so Solid
Mhm.
Doodle when that was a thing, and they came out the mini one.
Mhm.
I was on the wait list. I bought it when it came out. Still doesn't have it to work, and it's for sale on Marketplace. If you want to look it up and buy it, it's all yours. I did buy what do they call those? Resin printers.
Yep, that's
And
I don't know if you can see it in frame. That's back over here.
yeah,
And the drafting kit that I just ran over and grabbed is sitting on my Ender 3 right now.
awesome. Ender's
So,
great. Yeah, but I was there in the beginning when there was
oh
like
yeah,
Solid Doodle, Kit Kat was one of them.
yeah,
And then it was MakerBot that came out with the first one, and then the dual replicator came in, and
oh yeah, that was.
now we're nerding out. Now we
Yeah, well, but you brought up a really good like how I got here thing that I haven't touched on. Early pre-downturn, I guess technically early downturn. I'm not sure. Um, uh, Someone who became a buddy of mine decided to try to start a makerspace, and just found out about it. I'm like, this is really cool. Let's actually meet up. Let's do this. And people are like, no, we don't need to meet up. We'll meet up in like 6 months. I'm like, we're on a web form. Nobody's showing up in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, hey, let's just go have coffee together, next Wednesday. Cool. 3 of us show up. We talk through stuff. The guy who didn't actually talk through who didn't wasn't saying like, hey, we actually have to meet up and build this.
Mm-hmm.
We had him write up the write-up for the forum. The next week, 30 people showed up. And we're going around introducing ourselves, talking about the stuff we like to make, and what we do, what we, I'm excited about electronics. I make instruments. I do this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, someone's like, "Well, who was here last week?" And the 3 of us raise our hands, and everyone's like, "Well, who else?" Like, no, it's just the 3 of us. But if we'd said only 3 people showed up, none of you. How many of you would be here?
Right.
None of them raised their hands. That organization is now Twin Cities Maker. Is one of the largest maker spaces in the U.S. We've got 13,000 square feet. I think it's like 300 or 500, 600 members monthly.
Wow.
Who use this, who are current, like not counting past members. We've been going since we're not 15 years yet, but we're looking at that. So like community organizing is sort of like a loaded term there, but like figuring out how to pull people together, how to get people excited about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the teaching, like if you want to engage someone, if you want them to learn, you have to get them to figure out why it's useful to them.
Right.
Some people are naturally curious and will want to learn, and they're easy. They're the folks who, if you give them vaguely interesting content, they will just slurp it up. Other folks, if it's not useful to them, they don't want it. And you got to find that hook. You got to,
Yeah.
My fly tying kit's over there. So it's, yet another hobby.
Fly
gardening.
fishing too, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
of course, right? I'm not going to do something simple to be fair, I mostly fly fish for sunnies.
Okay.
So I'm not doing it the fancy stuff going out and tying stuff. I've got a portable tying station to take to the stream to tie, for the trout that are biting today. But no, I tie streamers and fish for sunnies.
If you ever come out to Idaho, bring your kit. We'll go wading in the river. It's beautiful.
Beautiful. My waders leak. It'll be great.
It was funny that you mentioned. Like I'm currently, this is Strive Summit podcast Strives.
Yeah.
I'm currently in the part of bringing community together, which is what this podcast is starting to do.
Yeah.
And actually, I wanted to tell you. I don't know if you know this. You're the first person I ever mentioned my idea Strive to.
Really?
2 years ago when we got on that random call just talking. I remember asking hey, what would you think about this place? And you were like, oh, that'd be great. Yeah, know. And
I was like, we need this.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, that right there is what got me going into this. And honestly,
good. I'm glad.
I didn't remember that until we're talking here. And I'm like, yeah, Mike was the first person I ever told about that. Holy shit, you know?
Yeah, no, I was like, this is a really cool idea. This is something that, and like, well, we've chatted, I don't know,
Half a dozen times, yeah.
Yeah, I was say, but since then, like, it's been, I was gonna say quarterly, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
But much more about like just sort of other more prosaic stuff. We haven't actually like sat down and chat because like that was more of a actual conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But like that sort of stuff is a big part of how I got here. Because I like to, the post-it note that said I like to learn new things.
Mm-hmm.
Talking with folks and finding out how it comes together, what they need. So like, someone who's, I'm good friends with folks who are structural side. Our worlds very rarely intersect. Like we're both BIM, we're doing our things. Like it doesn't matter. Like our
Mm-hmm.
project staff are working together, but we don't get to talk to each other. But those conversations where we can have that are like, well, what do you do with this? How does this work for you? And then like, oh well, we care about this. Like, oh well, it'd be really easy for me to change that. Would that help? Oh, that make this so much easier. And like those little exchanges. The chickens thing I mentioned before. So, AU 2019, I saw this really cool demo at in the expo hall. I'm like, this is
Mm-hmm.
great. We're never gonna need this. This is construction focused. We don't need this. Not useful to architecture at all. Like design side, not important. Pandemic hit, and we couldn't send architects to the job site, right? Because we're working on nursing homes,
Right.
which are like the most locked down of the lockdowns. But we can send them a headset. We can send them a disinfectant. I got my my spray bottle of alcohol here still
Mm-hmm.
from buying a bucket of those. Like this is now my like whiteboard cleaner. But like because you couldn't buy like 2 of those. You had to buy like 10. So like,
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
but you can disinfect it because denatured alcohol can clean electronics.
Mm-hmm.
And ship it to the ship it to the nursing home, let them wear it around, bring us to the facility, and let us download measurements of the facility. I'm like, this is great. Boom, called them up, bought a subscription, had to test it out. It's a pandemic. We're home. I'm building a chicken coop in the backyard. Well, let's figure out if I can model the chicken coop in Revit Beta using the new massing tools. And Bob's your uncle. I've got 3 talks at different conferences.
About chicken coop.
Right. Because to be fair, and this is a joke I used at all 3 conferences. Architects are exactly like chickens because they don't want to come to you. They're going to wander. If you're a BIM manager, they don't want to hear what you have to say. But if you say to a chicken the magic words treats, 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 they come running, and you toss out some handfuls of corn. To folks in an architecture office, if you say pizza lunch and learn, they show up.
Mm-hmm.
If you say it's new Revit training, yeah, nobody's coming. Pizza lunch and learn, they're going to be there. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. Okay. I did a lunch
Although,
and learn.
to be fair, architects don't like make a huge mess on the floor like chickens do, and they will stick around longer after there's less food. They're more polite.
I guess that depends on the architect. Well, Mike, I love having you on. If there's something, anything that's going on with you, you want to promote anything, what's happening?
Well, I know most folks have heard by now that Built North America is not happening. But one of my favorite things about that conference was the side conversations. The sit down and talk with peers. That was also one of my favorite things about the now defunct conference Midwest U.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to try to pull a rabbit out of somewhere creative and get a casual conference together for the summer. I will let you know more about that when that comes up. That's still in process. There's a whole host of stuff I got to figure out. I've got a crew working on that with me, small crew because there's not that many moving pieces that we can really spin off to folks. But if somebody's really excited about that and wants to help out, can definitely use a few extra hands on that. And the other one is last year I guess technically 2 years ago I ran the poll, and last year I presented at BCS a study of BIM overhead roles, like how much BIM you actually need. Because everybody's heard you need one BIM manager for 40 users or 40 hours of 1 hour per user, whatever that is. I was like, is that true? What does that mean? I'm going to run another poll. I want more data. I got statistically significant data for mid to large size firms in the US last time. I want more data. I want to actually be able to say like, hey, what's happening in small firms? I want to be able to say what's happening in the, because the 20 to 50 person firm size is a whole different market than the 50 to 100 person size, and the somewhere to 500, 250 is a whole different market than the 500 plus. I don't know where those points land.
Okay.
But I want to find out. Because one of the things that like everybody talks about is like, we've got to do more stuff like this, right? You go to a conference, you see this really cool thing. But it's not practical because they've got somebody who's doing, they've got 2 full-time Dynamo programmers. What? And a Python guy, right? And how, like, of course they can do this. I don't have that. Like I'm me trying to learn a new coding language on top of supporting all of my projects, on top of trying to spin up the ACC project, all the all the stuff we all do, and we all have to keep current on. But we all want to do these cool things. Let's, instead of getting stuck on that, let's figure out where those shifts land. Let's figure out how much overhead we can then advocate for to say, hey, look, if you have this much, we'll have better outcomes. You're complaining that we're hey boss man, hey partner, you're complaining that I don't get anything done from a BIM standpoint, that I'm not valuable to you. But if you're overworking me and not giving me the chance to actually build those tools, you're not giving me enough bandwidth to actually do that, you can't expect results. You can't expect one concrete guy to pour 500 yards in a day. You got to give them a crew, and you got to give folks the enough bandwidth to do their job. And I'm curious as to where we can see empirically that those things change in a much more granular level than I was able to last time.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like there's a lot of people who are not in BIM or not in engineering that don't understand the full capacity of what it takes to make a single drawing in Revit, in 3D. So my next question for you, I guess, would be about this conference. What's your overall goal? What are you looking for people to get out of this when they come show up?
So I have not yet tried to elevator speech this.
Oh, good. Congratulations.
So great way to cross-pollinate and learn from their peers so that they can then better collaborate. Because like BIM at its core is all about collaboration. It's all about building something better together and about building something together more efficiently. Well, not just building, but having more efficient stuff, doing it better. And it is about connecting all of can make our own ultimate thing, right? Like if you're in a silo and you've got your heads down, you can do something amazing. Like one of my second job out of drafting school, the single family home builder, I took their workflow that they had really dialed in for AutoCAD and cut it by 70%. What it used to take them 40 hours to do, you could do in 8 to 12. So like folks who say like, yo, Revit's less efficient than AutoCAD, like, no, you can, if you give me free reign to do this, I can do that.
Yeah.
A lot of us can. But if you say, oh no, we've got to do it this way, it has to include this, we've always done it this way. So like, no, we haven't always done it this way. You know what we've done for longer than Revit existed? Hold on. Right. This existed. This was in use professionally for longer than Revit has existed.
The scrolly tool. He's holding up the scrolly tool. Yeah.
So it's like, what? Like, no, we haven't always done it that way. For longer than that existed, we drew with a burnt stick in sand on the or on either burnt stick or chalk on the wall or on the floor. Like
right.
No, we haven't always done it that way. So, finding those ways to work together, because even at the largest firms, right? If you've got a 3,000 person firm who's maybe got a design tech department of 15 people, think about how little a 15 person office has for creative expansion. Like if you switch that to looking at it as an architect, you don't have that that expansive cross pollination. Those people are doing things outside of their office, but like they're really stuck in there. And so you don't have that depth of experience of, if you're a 15 person office, like, at our 90 person office, our accountants have more people to talk to about their technical problems than I do.
That's interesting. Right? That's interesting. Yeah.
So a project architect, I've got a dozen who can say like, hey, what did you do on this? Does anybody have any projects similar to this? Like, I've got nobody internally that I can go to those things. So I want to take folks like us who have enough BIM chops to ask stupid questions. Right?
Oh, I love that. There's no such thing as a stupid question, and I say that all the time, and I stand by it. If someone asks like, "How do I open Revit?" Not a stupid question.
Right. But they're the questions that are like, well, that seems like a bad idea. I wonder if I can do that. Like, or why is this? Who are willing to ask, like, have enough experience to have like climbed up. They don't need another technical exercise on how to build a family.
Right.
They need the master class of the like, oh, by the way, this is if you do this little thing, and that's not something you're going to pick up in an hour and a long class. It's something that you're going to pick up by sitting and talking about the problems you have building one particular thing and talking with other like-minded peers because somebody's done it.
Yep.
So I want to get 100, 300 of those like-minded peers together in a room, because it needs to be a large enough volume that people actually have stuff to share. And I don't want it to be just a small group. Small groups are great for certain discussions, but I want this to be a more free-form group. And sit down and talk about stuff. Right now what we're looking at is, on this table, there's going to be a flag that says design technology. On that table, there's going to be a sign that says Revit families. On that table, there's going to be a sign that says XR. Go to that corner of the hall and talk about it. And in a couple hours, we're going to take the flags down and change it.
That's awesome.
And it's not going to be there may be a facilitator leader per session. We're not sure yet. We're still trying to dial that in. But that's not going to be a, here's Alex. He's going to talk about, duct sizing for the next hour and a half, and then you can ask him questions for 5 minutes. It's going to be Alex is going to talk about his frustrations with duct sizing, and then we as a group are going to talk about that for, I don't know, 30, 90, 120 minutes.
Right.
It's very much how Minnesota Revit Users Group used to run. So MinRug used to be the largest Revit user group in the world, largest Autodesk user group in the world, and it petered off. But the general shtick of those meetings was somebody present for 15 minutes. It's not a huge, long, complex presentation, but somebody present for 15 minutes, and then we'd talk about it.
Yep.
And we'd have 20, 30, 40 people in those rooms chatting about what worked for them, what didn't. And I was early on in my career in those, I'm going to say, glory days of that organization. It also died. It died pre-downturn even. But we had a bunch of really, really knowledgeable folks doing really, really crazy stuff, and it let a lot of us grow.
And you want to bring that community back, and I get that. I think the conference is a great way to do it.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, Mike, again, I appreciate you coming on, and thanks for inspiring me to build Strive.
Oh, my pleasure. I'd even forgotten about that conversation.
So yeah, we're gonna have to stay in touch, but I want to thank everyone, all my listeners. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, like, subscribe, follow Strive, and hopefully we're posting every week, and you'll get a new person, or maybe Mike will be back on here to talk again.
More about Alex. Anytime you want me to talk about random stuff with you, I will talk about my favorite conspiracy theory or whatever.
Oh, we're doing that next. All right, thank you.
Sounds great. Be well.
Bye.